Every winter, rescuers find people who froze to death with their clothes taken off, not torn, removed, sometimes folded and set down neatly in the snow beside them. These are not people who were attacked. Nobody undressed them. In their final minutes, freezing to death, they took off the only thing keeping them alive. Most people assume that's madness, a mind snapping at the very end. That's not quite right. Those people weren't losing their minds. Their bodies were following a set of survival rules all the way to the end, and the last rule kills you.
What actually happens inside a human being as they freeze is far stranger than you'd expect, and it explains something much bigger: why winter, for almost everyone who has ever lived, was the thing most likely to kill them. Start with the moment the cold first touches you. Your body does not panic, it runs a plan, and the plan is ruthless. Deep in your brain sits the hypothalamus, your internal thermostat, and it cares about exactly one number: the temperature of your core. Your heart, your lungs, your brain, those must stay near 37 degrees Celsius or you die.
Everything else in your body is, as far as the hypothalamus is concerned, optional. So the first thing it does is squeeze. Blood vessels near your skin clamp down, a process called vasoconstriction, and warm blood is pulled inward, away from the surface, away from your arms and legs, away from your fingers, your ears, your nose. Your body is not failing here. It is choosing. It is deciding that your hands are worth less than your heart. This is what frostbite actually is. Not the cold reaching in and destroying your fingers, your own circulation withdrawing from them and leaving them behind. Your body triages you. It draws a line around the organs that keep you alive, and everything outside that line becomes expendable, held in reserve, sacrificed one part at a time to buy the core a few more minutes. People who survive severe frostbite sometimes lose those parts entirely. They were not taken by the ice. They were given up. Then comes the shivering. And shivering is not a symptom, it's a machine. Your muscles contract and release over and over dozens of times a second, and every one of those contractions is waste heat generated on purpose. You are burning fuel to make warmth, like a furnace built out of your own body. At full intensity, shivering can raise your heat production several times above resting. It is genuinely impressive, and it has one fatal flaw: it costs a fortune. It burns through your energy reserves fast, and it cannot be sustained. Your body is spending everything it has to hold the line, and it knows the spending has a limit. Now here's the part that should scare you more than the cold does. Before your body fails, your judgment does. As your core temperature slips down through the mild range into the low 30s, the first thing to degrade is not your strength, it's your thinking. You become confused, your decisions get worse, you lose fine motor control so your hands can't work zippers or buckles or matches. Rescue workers have an informal name for this cluster of signs: the umbles, stumbles, mumbles, fumbles, grumbles. The person is slurring, dropping things, walking badly, getting irritable. To someone watching, it looks like drunkenness, and the person experiencing it usually has no idea it's happening. That's the trap. The organ you would need in order to notice you are freezing is the organ the freezing damages first. Hypothermia deletes the ability to recognize hypothermia. So picture where that leaves you. Your extremities are shut down. Your muscles are burning through the last of your fuel, and the part of you that's supposed to sound the alarm has quietly gone offline. You are now making terrible decisions in a situation where a single bad one is fatal. And then, if nothing changes, your body plays its final card, and it is the strangest thing in this entire story. Remember that vasoconstriction, the clamping of the vessels near your skin? That isn't free. Holding those vessels tight is active work, done by tiny smooth muscles, and it takes energy to keep it up. Now consider that your body has been shivering for hours, running on empty. Eventually, those small muscles run out. They fatigue. They can't hold any longer. And they let go. All at once, the vessels that were sealed shut swing open, and the warm blood that had been hoarded deep in your core comes flooding back out to your skin. And you feel it. A wave of heat, sudden and overwhelming, spreading over your body. To a mind already too cold to think clearly, that sensation reads as one thing and one thing only: I am burning up. I have too many clothes on. And they do. In 1979, 3 researchers, Wedin, Vongard, and Hirvonen, published a study in the Journal of Forensic Sciences examining 33 hypothermia deaths drawn from Swedish police reports. They gave the phenomenon its name: paradoxical undressing.
People found in the snow in the freezing dark who had removed their coats, their boots, their shirts in their final minutes. It is not madness. It is a body that has run out of energy, opening every valve at once, and a brain too cold to interpret what that means. The last thing many of them felt was warmth, a fall summer arriving right at the end. Now, let's talk about what a lot of them did next, because this is where it stops being physiology and becomes something much older. In 1995, two forensic scientists in Berlin, Rothschild and Schneider, went looking for the same phenomenon in their own records. They reviewed 69 deaths from lethal hypothermia over 16 years. They found paradoxical undressing in about a quarter of the cases, confirming the earlier work. But they noticed something else, something nobody had properly described before. It was about where the bodies were found. Not out in the open, under beds, behind wardrobes, wedged into shelves, into cupboards, pushed into the tightest, most enclosed space available. People in the last stage of freezing to death had crawled into small, dark places, head first, and stayed there. The researchers called it terminal burrowing behavior, and they concluded it looked like an autonomous process of the brainstem, a primitive protective act surfacing as the higher brain shut down. Sit with what that means. Underneath your personality, underneath your language and your plans and your sense of who you are, there is an older set of instructions. And when the cold strips away everything on top, those instructions are what's left. They tell you to find a hole and get inside it. It is the same thing a fox does, the same thing a bear does. In the last moments of a human life, when the modern mind is gone, a much older animal takes over and tries, in the only way it knows, to den. It almost never works, but something in us still tries. So put the whole sequence together. Your body sacrifices your hands. It burns its fuel to make heat. It takes your judgment before it takes your strength. It floods you with false warmth when the fuel runs out. And at the very end, it puts you in the ground. That is what the cold actually does. It doesn't overpower you from the outside. It turns each of your own defenses, one after another, into the thing that finishes you. And this is where it stops being a strange medical story and starts being the story of nearly everyone who came before you. Because for almost the entire history of our species, this exact sequence was waiting outside every night, every winter, for everyone. Our ancestors lived through brutal ice ages, thousands of years at a stretch when the planet was dramatically colder and glaciers covered much of the northern world. And their bodies were the same as yours. No blubber like a seal, no dense fur like a bear, no heat-hoarding mass like a mammoth. We are a tropical animal shaped by warm places, standing in a frozen world. Every single one of the failures we just walked through was available to them all night, every night for 100,000 years, which reframes something people usually get completely wrong about the Ice Age. We picture ancestors who were simply tougher than us, grimmer, harder, but you have just seen why that idea collapses. Willpower is not a defense against this. Willpower is the first thing the cold takes away from you. The confusion arrives before the weakness. You cannot out-tough a process that begins by deleting your ability to judge your own situation. So toughness is not what saved them. Something else did. They invented their way out. Not with a spear and not with an axe, with a needle. Somewhere in the Ice Age, people took a sliver of bone, drilled a tiny hole through one end with a pointed stone, threaded animal sinew through it, and began to sew. That is the moment loose skins became fitted, sealed clothing that actually held body heat in instead of letting the wind pour through every gap. And we know this habit is astonishingly old from a genuinely strange piece of evidence. Lice. There is a species of louse that lives only in human clothing, never on bare skin. By sequencing its DNA and tracing when it split from the ordinary head louse, researchers estimated that humans have been wearing close-fitting clothes for well over 100,000 years. We learned to dress ourselves before we ever fully left Africa. They built, too. In what is now Ukraine, archaeologists uncovered houses constructed entirely out of mammoth bones, dozens of them. The massive bones stacked and interlocked into dome-shaped homes, heavy jaws and skulls anchoring the walls, huge curved tusks arched over the doorways to carry a roof of hide. Some are roughly 15,000 years old, and their foundations are still there. No metal, no wheels, no machinery. And at the center of those homes, always fire, which had to be fed with scarce fuel, shielded from wind and dripping snow, and never, under any circumstances, allowed to go out. Because you couldn't simply strike a match to bring it back, and by the time you needed it most, your hands would already be too clumsy to try.
Even that wasn't the whole answer, because we were not the only humans in the cold. Neanderthals lived through these same European winters, and physically, they were better equipped for it than we were. Shorter, stockier, broad-chested, built to hold heat far better than our long tropical frames. In the raw biology of cold, they had the advantage. And yet you're here, and they're not. The Ice Age did not simply reward the best body. It rewarded whoever could invent and store and cooperate their way through the dark. Which brings us to the part that everything in this video has been quietly pointing at. There's a detail about those ancient winter camps that most people file under cozy. Somebody always had to stay awake to tend the fire. And that is true, but it is not the whole reason. And the real reason is the entire point of this story. A freezing person cannot be trusted to know they are freezing. We just watched why. Judgment fails first. The person sliding into hypothermia becomes confused, then convinced they are fine, and then, at the very end, convinced they are too warm. Which means the alarm can never come from inside. It has to come from someone else's eyes. Someone who notices you slurring. Someone who sees you fumble the same knot twice. Someone who stops you when you start pulling at your furs and says, "No, keep them on, sit closer to the fire." That is what the group was actually for. Not just shared heat, though that mattered. Not just shared food, though that mattered too. The group was a set of external judgment, positioned around you, awake in shifts, watching for the exact moment your own mind began to lie to you. Alone, you are a tropical animal with a broken alarm. Together, you are something that can survive the dark. The cold spent 100,000 winters teaching our species one lesson, over and over in the harshest way available. Whoever kept watch over each other lived. So the next time winter comes and you turn a dial on the wall and the warm air fills the room without a single thought, understand what you're actually being spared. Not just discomfort, you're being spared a process that would take your fingers, then your judgment, then hand you a wave of false warmth and talk you into lying down in the snow. Every person you come from stood in front of that process, every year, with a bone needle, a guarded flame, and somebody watching them. And the strangest, most human detail in the whole thing is that at the very end, when everything we built is stripped away, a freezing person still tries to crawl into a small dark space and hide. Nothing is as ordinary as it looks.